Dawn broke thin and pale over the tracks, a colorless light spilling across the frostbitten earth. The mist clung low, curling around the rusted rails like something half alive, and the brittle grass beyond the station crunched under unseen footsteps. No sign hung from the depot wall. No posted schedule, no name. Just a lonely stretch of platform, sagging with age, waiting for a train no one asked for. The freight car rattled to a halt with a long, aching groan. No whistle had called its coming. No conductor announced its reason for stopping. It simply appeared out of the fog, a battered gray box with peeling paint and a crooked number scrawled on its side. From the car stepped a woman, thin and sharp-eyed, her face drawn tight as rawhide. She wore a coat several winters old, buttoned high at the neck, and in her hand she gripped a leather ledger worn soft at the edges. Behind her came the children, 6 of them, their faces hollow, their hair in limp clumps, the hems of their coats uneven, none of them older than 12, and one so small her feet barely touched the platform's cracked boards when she jumped down. Among them was a girl of 7, though she might have seemed younger for the thinness of her frame. Dust clung to her hair in grayish clumps, and in one hand she held a rag doll, its fabric body stained and one glass eye missing. She moved with the uncertain steps of someone who no longer expected kindness from anywhere. The townsfolk gathered, as they always did when the train came, not from mercy, but from something more familiar, curiosity, duty, the quiet habit of choosing. A butcher in a stained apron, a schoolmarm with a stiff white collar, a farmer with a crooked hand who owned more acres than teeth. They gathered in a loose half-circle, their eyes already darting, measuring, sorting. Not children, not names. Hands for work. Names were called. William Finch. A freckled boy stepped forward. Elsie Rourke. A girl with her hair in ribbons was taken by a matronly woman in a heavy cloak. One by one, the children were claimed, like tools from a shed, each one taken by those who needed them. A boy to mind the cattle, a girl to sweep the house. Not love, not family. Use. And then, no one called for her. The girl clung tighter to the matron's skirts as the space around her emptied, the other children leaving gaps where they had been. Her doll dangled from her hand, one ragged shoe half off her foot. No one'll have her. A voice muttered from the crowd. It might have been the butcher, or the man with the crooked hand, or no one at all. The matron's face did not soften. She turned, pried the child's fingers from the coarse fabric, and without tenderness, half-dragged her toward the edge of the freight car. The girl's feet stumbled, catching on a loose plank. At the edge of the car, the matron stopped. She set the girl down on the cracked wood platform. No parting word, no glance. The girl's shoulders hunched, her small face lifted toward the departing figure as the matron climbed back aboard. The whistle blew, a shrill note, slicing through the dawn. The train shuddered, metal sighing and hissing. A slow hush settled over the platform. The dust rose in little ghostly tendrils around the girl's bare legs. And then she cried. Not a wailing, not a tantrum, not even loud. Just that raw, ragged sound, torn from someplace deep. The sound of a creature left behind. The kind of cry not meant to be heard by the living. One boy near the back of the watching crowd kicked a stone. A figure moved then. From the shadows near the grain store, an old woman stepped forward. No one had seen her arrive. No one could have said where she had been. She was thin as a winter branch, her skin the color of old bone, her shawl trailing at her sides. The years were ringed around her eyes, dark as hollow bark. Slowly, with the weight of years in each step, she crossed the platform. The townsfolk watched, some with narrowing eyes, some looking away. She paid them no mind. She knelt before the girl, her gnarled hand brushing a streak of hair from the child's face. Her voice was cracked as dry leaves, words scarcely more than breath. I know that cry. The wind stirred the mist, curling around them. From far off, a church bell tolled once, a long, lonely note swallowed quickly by the distance. The girl stared up, eyes wide, face streaked with grime and tears. There was no recognition, no understanding in her expression, only that ancient grief children should never wear. The old woman's eyes glistened, though no tear fell. On the steps of the freight car, the matron paused, one hand gripping the iron handle, lips set thin. "Take her if you're fool enough," she called, her voice brittle. The old woman did not answer. She gathered the girl into her arms, brittle weight against her chest. The girl made no sound now, her face pressed into the old shawl. The freight car door slammed. The train lurched, puffed a long breath of smoke, and huffed away into the mist, wheels clattering into the nowhere beyond. The sound of it faded, leaving a hollow quiet behind. The platform emptied. A butcher turned back toward his shop. The schoolmarm smoothed her skirt and left. The man with the crooked hand spat once onto the dust. Only the old woman and the girl remained, the mist closing around them. The old woman said no more. She turned, the child in her arms, and walked away into the thinning fog. No one followed. No one asked. The dawn stretched long and colorless, and the tracks lay empty once more. The house stood on the edge of the earth, or so it seemed. Weather-beaten, sagging against the flat horizon where the land met the sky in a long, unbroken line. Its boards were sun-bleached and warped, the windows filmed over with years of dust no one had cared enough to wipe clean. The chimney leaned, a crooked tooth against the wide, empty sky. Inside, a single room. A fireplace long gone cold. Walls hung with photographs whose faces had blurred into pale, nameless ovals. A man in a broad-brimmed hat. A girl with braids. A woman seated stiffly in a high-backed chair. All of them staring out from the frames, as though waiting for someone to remember them. The girl sat by the hearth, knees drawn to her chest, the rag doll cradled in her thin arms. She said nothing. The shadows of the dying day reached long across the wooden floorboards, smudging the edges of things. The old woman moved with careful grace, lighting a lamp though the sun was not yet down. The flame caught, flickering against the glass. She didn't speak either. There was no need. Days passed in this way, the quiet settling thicker than the dust on the shelves. The girl watched the window always. Beyond it lay the tracks, too long, iron scars that led out into nothing. She sat there with the rag doll and the weight of everything left unsaid. Once a horse-drawn wagon creaked by, its wheels biting into the earth with a sound that carried into the hush. The girl sprang to the door, heart hammering, bare feet slapping against the cold wood. But it was no one. A man she didn't know, a load of hay. The wagon moving on without slowing. The old woman hummed at night. A tune so old even the wind seemed to pause to listen. It was the kind of melody not meant for words. The shutters rattled, the wind worrying the edges of the house like a restless hand. Somewhere a barn owl called. One evening, the old woman placed a bowl of thin broth before the child. No ceremony, no coaxing. A simple thing, pale and steaming in the flicker of the lamp. The girl stared down at it, then at the old woman, then back again. Her fingers trembled as she picked up the spoon. The old woman spoke only once. "Eat, child." The girl obeyed. In the far corner, a faded rocking chair moved. No one touched it. The girl dreamed in snatches, half-formed images stitched together in restless sleep. Iron tracks that stretched endlessly, fading into a mist that swallowed all things. Faces, briefly familiar, blurred and pale. A woman's hand on her shoulder, a boy's laugh, a dog with a crooked ear. Names lost to the night. She would wake with the rag doll clutched tight, the old woman's shawl pulled around her shoulders. Behind the house, there was a grave. A small, hunched stone weathered near smooth by time and storm. Only a single letter remained, M. The old woman tended it with a tenderness she showed nowhere else. Kneeling, weeding, placing pebbles or a sprig of dried flowers at its base. She spoke to it sometimes, but not when the girl was looking. One rain-heavy night, the girl stirred from sleep, a sound pulling her from the tangle of dreams. A voice thin cracked like old paper. The old woman speaking through the walls. "I hear you still. I see your eyes in hers." The words hung in the air long after the voice had gone silent. The girl pressed her face into the coarse pillow and did not move. As the days stretched thin and then thick again, the girl began leaving the house at dawn, without a word, gathering kindling, her bare feet blue with cold. She moved through the frostbitten grass, past the dead fence posts, to where the trees gave up trying to grow. A duty, though no one asked it of her. No one from the town came near. They spoke of the crone and the train child in low voices behind their hands. Superstition clung to that place like a scent. Best left alone, they said. No good could come from such folk. Once a boy from the edge of town, curious or cruel, threw a stone as she passed. It struck the earth at her feet, sending up a puff of dust. She did not flinch. She did not lift her eyes. The old woman watched from the window, her hand resting on a small, broken locket. Its clasp long rusted shut, the image inside faded to a pale oval. She turned it in her fingers, back and forth, while the girl worked. In the shed behind the house, more ruin than shelter, the girl found a harmonica, rusted, one end bent. She did not know how to play it, had never heard it used. But something about its weight, the coldness of the metal, felt right in her hand. She slipped it into the pocket of her dress and carried it with her everywhere. Seasons turned. The sky hung low and gray. The earth hardened. Snow came, blanketing the world in white and hush. The kind of snow that mutes every sound, making even the air feel hollow. The old woman weakened. Her voice thinned. Her hands shook. She moved slower, the lines in her face deeper, like the cracked earth before rain. And then, on the first snowfall, the girl spoke. One word. Coal. The old woman looked up, surprise flickering and then softening her features. A single tear welled in her eye, then slipped free, cutting a path down her sunken cheek. She nodded. That night, by the glow of the fire, she told a story. It was not the kind of story meant for children, not the stories of brave heroes or kindly saints. It was a story about leaving, about what it meant to be left, about the places sorrow makes inside you, the ones you carry always. She spoke of a station, far from here, tracks that cut through hills and prairies, a brother she had once held by the hand, a train whistle that sounded like a blade. How, in the confusion of the platform, she'd let go, how he was swallowed by the crowd, how no one knew his name, and how, all these years, she had waited, listening for that cry, that single, broken note of someone not just lost, but forgotten. I knew that cry, she said again, voice barely a thread. I heard it once before. The girl did not speak, did not question. She leaned against the old woman, her face against the brittle shawl, the smell of wood smoke and time. Outside, the wind shifted. A lone crow called. The photographs on the wall kept their silent vigil, their faces half lost to dust and memory. The night stretched long. The snow kept falling, and the hearth burned low, casting their shadows together across the hollow room. Years passed unnoticed. The days blurred into seasons, seasons into years, until no one could say for sure how long the girl had lived out there on the edge of the prairie, in that weather-beaten house, with the sagging porch and the hollow, dark rooms. She grew taller, though her eyes stayed the same, wide and sharp as glass, the color of a winter sky just before snow. The graveyard behind the house grew by one. A simple wooden marker was driven into the cold earth, crooked and half-sunk, the letters carved with a dull knife, rough and shallow. Martha it read, though no one in town ever called her by name. There was no preacher, no bell, no hymn, only a gathering of 3 townsfolk, the butcher, the man with the crooked hand, and the widow Lyle, who came only to make sure the old crone was truly dead. They spoke no words over the grave. They turned the earth, left the marker, and went back to their houses before the sun fell. The girl stayed long after. She sat in the brittle grass until dusk thickened into night, until the earth cooled and the wind cut through her dress like knives. She didn't cry. The grave was hers now, as much as the house, as much as the broken locket and the brittle photographs no one remembered. Around her neck hung the rusted harmonica, strung on a piece of old twine. She had never played it, never put it to her lips, but it hung there, a small weight against her chest, clinking soft against her collarbone when she moved. The old woman's shawl was hers now too, a threadbare thing, thin and faded, smelling of earth and smoke. She wrapped it around her shoulders as winter returned and the sky grew heavier. Then, one bitter morning, the whistle blew. A thin, jagged sound that cleaved the quiet clean through. It came from far off, yet near enough that it made the girl's heart still in her chest. She knew that sound. It lived in her marrow. The sound of metal wheels against iron rails. The sound of doors slamming. The sound of children stepping down into air they did not know. The girl left the house before she knew she'd risen, feet moving over frozen ground, down the path worn by her own coming and going. The tracks lay ahead, just as they always had, long and gray and waiting. The freight car sat at the platform, sagging and worn, its paint flaked to nothing, its door hanging askew. It might have been the same car. It was the same car. Different men ran it now, different matron, but the machine itself didn't change. The children stepped down, thin and dirt-streaked, faces pale with long travel and nights spent against cold wood. Each one clutched a bundle, a knotted scarf, a ragged bag, a string of buttons on a loop. 6 of them, none older than 10. The matron was another woman, but she was the same. Thin-lipped, hard-eyed, her hair pulled tight enough to pain. She barked names, her voice cracking like a whip against the cold air. The townsfolk came. They always came. Not because they wanted to, but because habit pulled them. A kind of practiced indifference had settled over them through the years. They measured the children the way a man measures a sack of flour or a sack of nails. How long might this one last? How strong were his shoulders? Could that one mind a fire? Could that girl clean a floor? The girl stood at the edge of the trees, unseen. The frost clung to her shawl. The harmonica swung softly against her chest. She watched, expressionless, as the choosing began. One child, the smallest of them all, tripped on the step. Her thin ankle buckled, her bundle spilling. The matron hauled her up by the arm, left a red mark blooming on her cheek. The girl moved closer. One step, then another. The same hush settled, the same selecting. Names called out, hands claimed, bundles gathered, until only one remained. A boy this time, perhaps 5. Hair the color of straw, eyes too large for his face. He clutched nothing. No bundle, no scrap. His hands hung at his sides. The air thickened, and the cold made him shiver. No one stepped forward. The matron shrugged. No one'll have him, she muttered, voice hard as stone. And then the boy began to cry. Not loud, not wild. A sound so small it seemed it might vanish in the wind. But it didn't. It lived in the air like a thread of smoke, and it found its way into the hollow space inside the girl's ribs, where something old and buried cracked open. That cry, that sound, the sound of being left behind. The boy's eyes found hers. For a long moment, the platform was every platform, every freight car, every child who had stood in the dust, waiting for hands that never reached. It was the old woman's face. It was a brother lost. It was a girl in a threadbare shawl. The girl stepped forward. The harmonica clinked against her chest as she moved through the brittle grass, across the worn planks. She felt the townsfolk's eyes on her, heard their muttered voices, the dismissive scoffs. A voice called out, "You're no one." She didn't care. Her voice, when it came, was rough from disuse, a splintered thing like wind through dry branches. "I'll take him." A murmur passed through the crowd. The matron snorted a laugh, a sound with no mirth in it. "Suit yourself." The girl reached the boy, who had stilled at her words, his face blotched with tears, his chest hitching. She gathered him to her, lifted him into arms that were thinner than they ought to be, but still strong enough. He buried his face against the old shawl, against the scent of wood smoke and frost. The freight car door slammed. The train groaned, huffed, and pulled away, leaving behind only dust and the long, slow fading of wheels against rail. The townsfolk turned away. The girl and the boy remained. She bent her head, her mouth close to his ear. The harmonica knocked softly against his shoulder. "I know that cry," she whispered. A crow called from the line of trees. The girl did not look back toward the house. She did not look to the townsfolk. She walked, carrying the boy down the same road, into the thickening trees. The harmonica clinked against her chest, and the old, empty platform stood silent behind them.